Hello and welcome to this special edition of Breakthrough, Spotlight on Immigration. I'm Sister Joan Gallagher.
And I'm Christian Murphy. Thanks for being here for this vital moment and this vital conversation.
Right. It is no secret that as we sit here now, a week away from a critical and crucial election, we are in a moment that is unprecedented, particularly as it pertains to the topic of immigration. The ever-changing nature of immigration in our country's history has brought us to a point of dramatic division between parties and policies and overall ideals of how the United States should approach this situation.
During this election year, we have witnessed two very different tones from campaigns when approaching the subject of immigration. One side is focusing on the policy language and looking at this as a specific matter of law, while another side is approaching this from a human rights and equal opportunities issue.
Yeah. And let us once again be clear in stating that as Sisters of St. Joseph, along with our partners, we are a nonpartisan community with a mission towards serving the dear neighbor without distinction, and this is how we approach this conversation again. We are here today specifically to look at immigration as it pertains to this election, this year, and through the lens of two of our dear neighbors who are in the field and hands-on doing the work.
So whether you're watching live or viewing afterwards when convenient for you and your busy schedule, I want to say thank you for being here. And very thank you to our guests, Sister Janet and Claudia from the Immigration Clinic here, Long Island Immigration Clinic, for being here for this conversation. So I want to hand it off to you if you could say a quick hello and introduce yourselves.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sister Joan. Thank you, Christian. My name is Sister Janet Kinney, and I'm the director of the Long Island Immigration Clinic, which is a pro se clinic that predominantly serves asylum seekers, but other individuals as well with their immigration paperwork. And we really help them throughout their legal process through the court system and in whatever way we can. And just to say that this effort really was incubated during the pandemic, actually, and some wonderful immigration advocates across Long Island who saw a great need for this service.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. My name is Claudia Cadenillas. I'm the immigration attorney for the Long Island Immigration Clinic. So my role in the clinic is I help with limited legal representation for our immigrant friends. We help them fill them out their asylum applications and their I-5, which is the I-589 applications. We help them with declarations and on their evidence package as well. We also help with other items such as work permits and motions.
Wonderful. Yeah, and what a welcome that friends receive coming to a country that they're unfamiliar with, right?
Absolutely.
So there's so much talk about the immigration system being broken, in crisis, in peril. There's so much negative and really hateful language associated with those who seek to immigrate, those seeking asylum. The times I have been with sisters and friends at the border, and I know, Sister Janet, you just recently returned, I did see broken and weary people on the move due to the crisis caused in their lives, often putting them in peril. So they're really seeking safety. The power of repetition of words and language can have an impact on how we view topics, issues, and then have an impact on how we move forward on the topic. We all know that language can certainly shape meaning, and our language can also lead to the danger of a single story. Mark Seitz, Bishop of El Paso, recently wrote, and I quote, "Having served at the border now for more than a decade, one of the things that angers me most is how often complexity and nuance at the border are flattened and manipulated. We can all see how the border is represented by politicians, pundits, and the media. One of the most troubling examples of this is when the border and migration are spoken about in terms of a crisis," end quote. What comes to mind when you hear Father Bishop Mark's words on the use of crisis language?
I think one of the first things I think we need to say is that, really to anyone, is the fact that global migration has been with us since the very beginning of time. And particularly ourselves as Christians, but even no matter what your religious affiliation might be, migration, being on the move, it's been with us since the very beginning of time. So I think we need to kind of reframe that for people, because there will always be migration. We know we need it because of work. People literally move, and we want their expertise, and that is in fact part of our immigration system. People come because they have certain types of expertise that our country wants. So I think we have to get away from using a word that really does not capture the whole experience, because I think it then does charge the conversation in a very, very different manner. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Claudia.
Yeah, so more from on the ground level of what we're doing at this specific clinic and in perhaps other settings, I think misinformation is a really big problem. Whether you look at it from someone who is looking to obtain some type of immigration benefit, or you're looking at it from the view of a voter. So there's two specific examples I actually want to bring to the table. I had one person come up to us recently stating that they were looking to get a work permit and they were looking for help. And so in getting that help, they went to social media, they spoke with an attorney, and I put that in quotes because the more I speak with this person, I realized there was no attorney. This person was not eligible to get any type of work permit. They got charged $400 to get their fingerprints taken via Zoom. So that doesn't even make sense, right? So that's a big item on misinformation. And then the other aspect of misinformation is, so just to highlight recently, the application CBP1 was spoken about in the recent BP debate. And I just want to clarify, if somebody does not use the CBP1 application, it actually causes a rebuttable presumption that you cannot apply for asylum. So it doesn't give you any legal benefit when you do come in and you use that app. It's just so that you can schedule an appointment and come into the country. So little items like here and there, the misinformation around the immigration topic is, to me, it's a very big crisis.
That's incredible. The manipulation of like social media. I mean, you can't even fathom that there are people out there doing that to people, but there are. Could you actually just expand a little bit on the application and what that looks like for folks? I'm assuming folks watching this may not have a clue what that process is like. Could you tell us a little about that?
Certainly. So since May of last year, specifically May 11th of last year until May 11th of next year, 2025, anyone that tries to enter the country and tries to apply for asylum must use the CBP1 application, which in theory you're only able to download in Mexico, but in practice we've seen that it's working differently. At any rate, you must download that application, you must get an appointment, and only then, once you get an appointment, you can go up to the border. So what I was saying before is that if you do not get that appointment, that creates a rebuttable presumption that you're not eligible to apply for asylum, which you then must deal with later in the deportation proceedings. You're still allowed into the country, but it makes it so much more difficult for you to gain a possible asylum application, which you may or may not be entitled of, but the adjudication of the application is a topic so different on itself. It really, the CBP1 application hinders people entering the country.
Right, and it really does. I mean, it makes it so much more difficult, time-consuming. So now people are waiting for months on end to get one of those appointments.
Wow.
So again, it's one more stumbling block for the people that want to seek asylum here.
And does that application have to be completed in their country of origin?
When you download the application from Mexico, it's just an application that you download on your phone, and then you try to get the appointment. So we've actually been seeing the trends of people not knowing how to download the application. The application is only available on English, Spanish, and Creole. Just overall technical difficulties. Some people get their phones stolen, so they don't even have access to do it.
Right.
There's certain exceptions, but the fact that that's in there could be problematic.
Every now and then I just want to jump into the real world for a minute, outside of this experience, and just say, like, for you viewers, like, imagine your day-to-day experience and how much you rely on your technology, your phone, all these. Imagine not understanding how to use some of that technology, and then being called upon to use it for your life. Really use it for your next step. On top of that, work, all these other things. I'm thinking, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about like little tiny things I've had with health insurance struggles of like trying to get somebody on the phone and like, I'm not even in a time of real need, but like that's really stressful. When you're calling, you're getting a robot, you're getting this or that. And on top of it, language barriers. So just to kind of paint a picture too for people.
And think too, Christian, like even and getting reception. You know, how many
Sure.
times
Oh, yeah.
we're working with internet and you can't get enough bars to get connected. And people and again, you're talking in some rural areas where they're trying to make that connection. It's extremely difficult. Extremely difficult.
And it's wonderful, it's efficient if it's all set up online, but
Right.
access, there's
Yeah.
no access, what good is it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So some of the things being thrown around from the two campaigns regarding what will be done about immigration are very drastic and couldn't be more opposite in language and approach. Now, without specifically naming any candidates, I want to read some of the actions that are being proposed by the two potential administrations. Okay, so mass deportations of immigrants, an end to birthright citizenship, a bipartisan border bill, increase in restrictions, more resources allocated for legal pathways, a tightening of asylum rules, more resources for immigration review, leaning on local law enforcement in areas to help with deportations and to avoid overwhelming the flow areas. Now, I know I just threw a lot at the both of you. It's a lot of things right there. It can be overwhelming to think of from a voting perspective. But especially for voters who use their mind and hearts, I think it's important to really look at all of these proposals. It can be troubling to hear these ideas and claims and to discern where are we in this. So my question to you to boil all this down is, what of these ideas mentioned seem like areas of real opportunity that give you excitement or give you promise?
Sure. Yeah, because clearly some of these, when you say this, mass deportations, and when you think about that, that would have huge implications on our economy. I think people forget that so many of our immigrant friends are the backbone of our economy. And if you were to begin something like that, not only would it be cost prohibitive, like where are we going to get the billions of dollars that it would cost to do that, but what are the other implications that's going to have on us, on this country? So clearly some of these ideas, while they might sound to some people attractive, they really are not going to be to the long-term benefit of the United States itself. So, but that being said, certainly legal pathways, and I think we both would agree on this and can say something about it, would be of great benefit. There are over 11 million people currently in our country today who do not have a legal pathway, who are tax-paying individuals, are not getting the benefits of our healthcare systems, any of these public benefits. Again, there's a lot of myths out there that say, they're taking our public benefits. They're not even getting those benefits. So to say by having those legal pathways, there are 11 million people already in this country, law-abiding, that deserve a legal pathway and would very much like to be fully incorporated in our country. So I would say clearly that. I think there's no denying an acknowledgement that we need to have a better system at the border. And that there needs to be a better system, but it needs to be a humane system that really treats people, with dignity. And I don't know if you want to add, I know you had some particular ideas you wanted to mention.
Yes, so I wish I knew how to solve them all, right? But you were talking about how we need a more humane system or just logistics of the border, and I'm a big advocate of legal representation. Anyone that is facing immigration proceedings has to do so by themselves. There is nowhere that states that anyone who is in immigration deportation proceedings has the right to an attorney. If they want to get one, they need to be able to afford one. And on a way, I like to correlate that a little bit to our criminal proceedings, because on those settings, you have the constitutional right to an attorney, because your life, your property is at risk. But here you're risking somebody going back to a country where they suffered a lot of torture, and you're really not giving them help. So I think legal representation could go a long way, and it could also help a lot with the burden that the immigration courts have. The immigration judges, the government attorneys, they're overworked and they need help too. And I think just legal representation would help immensely on really like the logistics of how to handle this problem.
Yeah, and even that we speak about a more humane manner in which to work with immigration, there's also the underlying issues of why. Why are people leaving their homelands? And we know for various reasons, but what are some of the reasons that you're encountering, the friends that are coming here to the clinic? Why are they seeking to come to the United States? Why aren't they staying in their homeland?
Yeah.
They're scared to be home. You know, that's the one thing that we constantly see. I can't go back because this criminal gang is going to go after me or my family. There's also a lot of issues where women are treated as property, we know, which goes to the topic a little bit of domestic violence. You know, a difference in perhaps is in the U.S. we're a little more aware and progressive, for lack of a better term. You know, I'm Peruvian, so I grew up there, very conservative, a little bit machista type of scenarios. So you have those type of scenarios where people are just afraid to be home.
Right. And then you have the whole LGBTQIA population. In some countries, it's absolutely not tolerated. And so we've had individuals coming, for instance, I think of one of our individuals, a gentleman, 34 years old from Honduras, who he had no opportunity at home. He was being victimized. He was, you know, the soles of his feet. He got second and third degree burns because they set him on fire. They pursued him into Mexico, continued to threaten him. He had no choice. In fact, the gangs were in cahoots with the local police, you know, and we see this time and time again. The other thing I want to say, and I know we're going to get into this, I think, a little bit more in the program, and I think Claudia will do a great job on explaining the specifics of asylum. But when our asylum laws were put together, the last time they were reformed, it was a different time, and we're seeing people, our asylum requirements are very, very restrictive, and we are seeing many people who are experiencing violence. They're experiencing gang violence and persecution, and being, you know, persecuted by the gang doesn't necessarily provide you access to asylum. So you really have to show, in fact, that your country will not protect you, and that is why you are seeking asylum. So, you know, it's not easy to get asylum, and that's another one of the myths that I think we have to dispel, because people think, some people think that, oh, by crossing the border, oh, they automatically get asylum, they automatically get all these benefits, and it's not that way. They're eligible to seek asylum, but there are very particular grounds that they have to prove to the immigration courts in order to get that protection. And, you know, as I say, I think, and you would probably agree with, there's a lot of myths, you know, around that make it very challenging.
And what you're saying too about asylum, and we're going to get to this too, but the rules regarding asylum seeking were dated way back at different times, different experiences, wartime, different circumstances that our country and other countries were going through. And now to compare that to today is just not fair to the person that is trying to. And again, I feel like I'm going to keep being that little thing on the word portal that tells you a little fun fact, like to take you out for a second here, a minute, pop up here is, think of this in the regards of, I've heard people say this before, of saying like, well, that's not really a serious thing for asylum. And it's like, well, when do we get into this conversation of what's serious? What's the right level of persecution? When COVID happened, I remember talking to some people about this, about people that were sheltering at home and stuff because of COVID. And imagine going somewhere where you don't feel safe and then having to be stuck there. Well, imagine that times 10 if you're in this type of situation and you're trying to escape. And what does the word home mean to you? I think that's something prayerfully to throw out there as you're watching this. Do you have an association with that word home? And if you do, well, then you're in a different place with this conversation, and we need to pray about that. So I just want to throw that out there before we get to our next piece.
Yeah, but even like that, being hunted down in your country of origin, and then coming to another country seeking safety, and still being hunted down. You know, where do you run? Where do you hide? But there's much talk of the bipartisan border security bill for immigration reform that failed to pass an advanced border security. And we do not get into the who's or the specifics of that. But what we're curious about is, why has this become such a tough area for bipartisanship efforts? Because you look back, like we were saying, in the 80s and the 90s, and you see the trends regarding party stances, there was more common ground and a better effort towards reaching across the aisle. We saw this in 2007, the bill with the Bush administration tried hard to pass, but it failed. The same with Obama's administration in 2012. Since those two efforts, we have noticed a clear shift and a dramatic split. So here's the question. What are we to make of that? And is there any hope that we could see a shift back to bipartisanship with this issue?
Well, it is a major challenge, and I think you say it correctly when, it's truly not just this issue, although in this political climate and in this particular election, they are making this, I would say, the issue, the make or break issue, for this election. And so I think it is a product of our current, election, where they want to make it so. And when you think about it, back in the day, before, probably 20 years ago, 30 years ago, politicians would move their families to Washington. Their kids would be on the same baseball teams. They'd be on the same block.
Yeah.
There was relationship building. And part of what I think does need to happen is the building up of relationships where I'm seeing you and you and you as a person, because I think we've lost that. We've lost that, here. So I think it's going to take a lot of work. I think it's going to take a particular, I'll say, president that we elect that can start to maybe build some of those bridges again. But it's going to be very hard. And do you want to?
Yeah, just to briefly add, thank you. I think there's just a lot, again, misinformation, lack of information. Just to put it this way, you may or may not know that your neighbor is undocumented. They may have been here for the last 10 years, and you may or may not know if they have a meaningful opportunity to become a legal permanent resident. Yet on the other side, one could be really quick to judge, oh, this should be done or the other should be done. So just a lack of misinformation of who really you're talking about and whether that person has the opportunity to become a citizen, because people don't fail to become citizens because they don't want to be. It's just a lot of times the law doesn't allow it. So I think that's a big issue.
Yeah, and education. I think we need to do a lot more education because, as you say, I just don't think people, as you say, are getting the right information.
Yeah.
In June, the Biden administration announced new actions regarding asylum-seeking and migrants who seek asylum that arrived in the U.S. illegally. This was a shift from previous actions. It seems like in part due to heavy criticism that Biden was facing due to what was being called extreme surges of migrants. So, since the two of you are in the thick of it when it comes to asylum-seeking and helping families through this process, could you paint a picture for viewers on what the basics are of seeking asylum and what actions like this mean to folks who come to you in need of help?
Sure. I'm going to let Claudia get into the particulars, but I cannot overemphasize, we cannot overemphasize how, complex the system is. And, it's a lengthy application. You have to prove an awful lot of information in that application. It's not in your native language. So if you can imagine coming over the border and being thrown a bunch of stuff and being expected to complete all of this, and an attorney is not being provided for you, that's massive. Put yourself, I say, gosh, if I was, say, in another country trying to seek asylum and I did not know the language and it's in German and I'm expected now suddenly, to prove my asylum case. I always say, put yourselves in their shoes, So as she describes this, think about that, not having fluidity in the language nor the process. So tell them everything that's involved because it's complicated.
So let's look at asylum a little bit from a legal standpoint, and it's humanitarian relief that is codified on the Immigration and Nationality Act. And if we look at it from elements perspective, you have to have a persecutor, so somebody that's doing the harm. Then that persecution, that needs to lead to persecution. It can be either past persecution or well-founded fear of future persecution, on account of, which is nexus of. So all that harm that you suffer must be under 5 different grounds. So your race, your nationality, your membership in a particular social group, your political opinion, or your religion. So anything outside of those 5 grounds is from the get-go not protected under asylum. Now, granted, you might want to get an attorney so that you might have a story that you think doesn't fit right away from asylum, but the more you dive into it, you realize, okay, really, I am actually being persecuted in account of blah, 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 So that's why, having an attorney is helpful on that standpoint. But looking at it from the ground perspective, you have a person that's coming here, that's approaching the border, whether they use the application, right, the CBP-1 or not, that's an issue. They go up, they have to affirmatively state that they are in fear of going back to their country. They may or may not get a credible fear interview, which is an interview that an officer does at the border, asking about why you're afraid. And the amount of times that I've had somebody coming here and be like, no, I got asylum, my credible fear interview is positive, I'm like, no, that's just the start of your process. So from the get-go, it's very confusing. And then this person's put, more likely than not, in the petition proceedings. And also, very important, to apply for asylum, you only have 1 year. And so the amount of people, now 1 year sounds like a lot of time, I recognize that. Well,
Goes fast.
It goes fast.
but it
yeah,
does,
right,
it goes
yeah.
fast, especially when you don't really know what asylum is. And like I just stated before, there's a certain amount of elements that you must be able to meet. And the burden is on you, the respondent, to show the immigration judge that you are a refugee under asylum laws and protections. So, it's very hard to get, and to do it by yourself is essentially an uphill battle.
Yeah, and one other thing, what's also happening now, so they cross the border, and now they get a notice to appear in court. And as she mentioned, you might have a notice to appear in court in Texas, and now you hear you're in New York. And you missed that hearing in Texas, well, you're going to be deported, You're going to be, there's going to be grounds for your
And
removal.
there's no way of transferring
Well,
that
you
hearing
can,
to your
but
location.
how do you?
But you need to know how to do
need to know how to do
that.
that. You need to know you've got to update your address. But we've had situations where people, and I can think of someone that called us, a friend of the congregation, the other day, for a gentleman who has come through the border, and he says, well, he doesn't have a date in court until, I'm going to say 2026. So he's got time. I said, but did he file his asylum application? He came in when? He only has a year. Oh, I don't know if he did. So they, under this misnomer, oh, I have plenty of time. No, you do not. It's just that's when your court date is. So it's, it's things like that, and nobody tells them all of this. And not to mention how sometimes they're treated at the border as well is not helpful. What they're told.
You mentioned the 5 areas, and it's like, again, to show the outsider perspective of, like, we in this country speak so highly of mental health awareness and taking care of yourself. You hear all the ads in every podcast, all the things like that. Now imagine you're coming here and you've been through a traumatic experience, and then you're being told, okay, fit it into a bubble, be able to write it out, explain it.
Right.
And that the feeling and the rehashing of such a trauma on top of all this is...
That's an
I can't even-
excellent point. And here at the clinic, we train volunteers to assist with the asylum process, and they're overseen by attorneys, like Claudia, to help them with the nuancing and what needs to happen. It can take several sessions before they can really dig deep, because let's face it, a trauma, you're going to try to, put it out of sight, out of mind, hide it, and not deal with it. And so as they start to delve into it, it's quite painful and difficult. And you have to pause and say, okay, let's stop for tonight. Let's go back to this. And the trauma on their children. It is multi-layered. And as you say, people don't take any of that into consideration. Think, oh, big deal. Fill out a 12-page application and then do this. Our asylum applications, when we complete them, are anywhere between 100 and 150 pages.
Wow.
So that's
with the packages with evidence.
with evidence.
Yeah.
With evidence. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
we help do in order to put a very good, as best as we can, application. A person without that support of an attorney or a program like this, they'll be lucky if they can get the 12-page application in. And we'll have young, young and old, people come in and say, oh, my judge says the next times I come into court, I must have this all done. And they're not even here a year. So they have, the judges
Yeah.
are asking for it before they even get to the year.
I have an off-script question before we get back to this, just because I'm really curious. I'm also thinking about how they say, so many percentage of any type of crime usually has family related. It's like that idea of a crime in a home, passion crimes, all these things. So how many times are you seeing, from the news we'll see, oh, someone's fleeing asylum seeking because of a gang, because of these things that are very large title things. But when in reality, could it be something where now it could be family related, a family trouble, and then you're coming here and you're having to rehash it, and then you're also having to feel like you're rebelling against your family, right? Do you see that a lot too?
So often. So we actually see it. There's a lot of women that come here, and I recognize that domestic violence can go whichever way, but we've seen mostly women that come here and say, in Peru, in Honduras, and Guatemala, my ex-husband or my partner did ABC to me. And it's so hard to me to just listen to the stories, and they touch me to my core, some of the things that this woman went by, and then my next explanation to them is that domestic violence is actually not a protected ground. And so that's when we go ahead, and one of the things that we mention is, okay, so this horrible thing happened to you, but then I have to explain it to them. You have to explain to them, why did it happen to you? So don't just tell me that your husband, your partner is beating you, but why do you think he's beating you? So that we can fit it into an account of, because we don't want to, of course, send any frivolous applications either. We want to be compliant with the law and within the applications, but at the same time, just explaining that domestic violence is not something that's protected. I see the light on their eyes, literally, and I understand that there's domestic violence here too, but it's just so hard to,
But domestic violence here, the policing over there is very different.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, again, so for those that are saying, oh, you just call the cops and that's your family business. It's like, well, what happens when you call a cop and a male officer arrives and it's not the same?
Exactly.
And we need to paint that full context
Right.
picture here. It's not the
And
same.
that's one of the things that we actually try to expand on when writing affidavits for the declarations. And it goes directly almost to the heart of the asylum claim, the unwillingness or that the police is unable to help. That's actually something that the judges like to see explained on that. And that's right. You explained that perfectly. The policing is different.
Wish it wasn't
Yeah.
perfectly, right?
One of the, I'm just really, as you're thinking of stories, and I'm just thinking of some of the many people that are seen here at the clinic, there's also a misnomer in terms of, I'll say, the types of people that come. We have people who are successful business owners, who leave successful businesses. We had a woman, professional practice, a dentist, they wouldn't be leaving those things behind if there wasn't a reason for it. Just as people wouldn't be coming for weeks, months, clothes on their back with their young children if they didn't have to come. So I think, back to that question of the criminalization piece, people have to understand, again, I think, more of what are the roots causes of this migration, because that has continued to dramatically change, and because of the gang violence and because of some of the things that our own country has done, has forced people into migration. So it is a really deep-seated issue that is not the fault of those individuals who are coming to us. And I think that's something that also gets missed when we have these conversations about immigration.
Go.
Yeah, because there'd be less to fix with immigration if we fixed, again, the underlying issues, the why.
The why?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
most of them would have been very happy to stay in their thriving business, in their dentist practice, with their family and friends. So many of them are leaving loved ones behind. I just say, so touch. You mentioned just last week, I was at the border. I was with an organization network, Nuns on the Bus, really trying to get the vote out and everything. We were at the border in Nogales, and I have to tell you, it had been a few years since I had been back there. Here you saw, on both sides of the border fence, people visiting with their loved ones through the slats of this huge border wall. Would break your heart to see. This is how we are separating our families here. Heard one story, I was with Keno Border Initiative, and they were saying how some Border Patrol officers, and this is not all of them, were saying to them, oh, you're here to seek asylum? Well, you have to leave everything here. Everything? Yes, everything. Well, everything included their 10-month-old baby's medication that she needed to live. So suddenly she's here with no medicine. Thankfully, Keno Border was able to get some doctors to, work with them and get that, or that child could have died.
Yeah.
So, anyways, if you could see the people, if people could see the flesh and blood that this is impacting, I think they might feel differently. If they could put themselves in the feet of these parents, think of their children, their grandchildren, is that what they would want for them?
Lost a sense of our common humanity, right?
Exactly.
And trying to understand in a humane way, relational way, let me try to understand what it is to walk in your shoes. I never sense I will be displaced from my country at this point, but really, but what is that like? So I need to understand that better. And as I do, it goes from here to here, touches my heart. So then I'm going to respond differently. And I think as the United States, to live into our name with a more compassionate heart and an understanding.
Yeah. Perfectly said.
You mentioned the term, criminals and this language. And so I'm curious, how much can you share about the restrictions that we're seeing, the asylum restrictions, how they're impacting migrants who are trying to seek a new life, who are not quote-unquote criminals? We keep hearing words like criminal surges, all these different things. But what are you seeing in regards to the impacts of the restrictions that are happening to families who are trying to start anew?
Well, I'm going to let Claudia answer what those restrictions actually are. I will say for us at the clinic right now, we haven't seen an overall effect of it, but ask us a year from now, because these restrictions just recently went into effect. And as you heard Claudia say earlier, they have 1 year, right, to prove their case. So us on the ground right now, we're still pretty busy. But explain to because it is having some implications certainly on the people that are trying to get in here.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing before we even answer the question, I just want to talk a little bit about the language of calling someone a criminal just by the essence or the virtue of being here illegally. Just seeking an immigration benefit by itself does not make someone a criminal, and I think I just want to take a pause on that, because when we're really talking about someone who is a criminal, think about it. They're going to court, they're facing a jury, they're being sentenced. So I just, just because you're here undocumented, you're not a criminal. And then to go ahead and to answer the question, so one of the most recent policies changes that we've seen, as I was mentioning before, is the CBP1 application, which, I've explained previously is the application. This comes with its own challenges, technology. And then more recently, earlier this year in June, President Biden did come up with a recent proclamation, a Securing the Border proclamation, which in addition to the CBP1 application, does hinder the numbers of people that can come into the country. I have specifics if you would like me to read it.
Yes, please.
So, according to the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, they wrote down that effective June of 2024, this rule, the Securing the Border, suspends the entry of non-citizens when there is a 7 consecutive calendar day average of at least 2,500 encounters between ports of entry. Once that rule is triggered, it will continue until 14 calendar days after a 7 consecutive calendar day average of fewer than less 1,500 encounters. Notably, apprehensions during this current administration have never fallen below this level. So, it's really hindering people from coming here and asserting their asylum claims. Whether they have one or not is something that needs to be adjudicated internally. But to not allow people to present that claim, I think is dangerous.
And so now what you've got is hundreds of people on the Mexican side of the border who are just waiting and waiting now for months and months and months. Similar to what happened back in 2018, 19, when we had the migrant protocols that you may have met from the prior administration, where you then had these developed tent camps, not the best sanitary conditions, usually in flooding areas, kind of thing. So creating another humanitarian crisis on the opposite side of the border because of these added restrictions. I think we all agree a better process needs to happen there, but we have to find a way to allow those who are eligible to claim asylum be able to do so.
It all seems so hot and cold. Like every decision just seems to be such a
Yeah,
like.
real swing.
Were you both surprised when these new restrictions came through? Was it something that were you expecting it or?
For me, I think because of the political climate that we were in, I think the current administration felt they had to show something. I would have to be
okay.
honest.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that's real. I think they had to show that they were doing something because the rhetoric on the other side was so harsh, it was making it sound like they were doing nothing. When in fact, this current administration has been doing many positive things, and trying to expand legal pathways. And unfortunately, some of those are now getting caught in the legal system because there are being legal challenges on them. But they're attempting to do more good, trying to get our DACA, children, who are now young adults, a legal pathway here. Again, giving back to our country, So, but I think because so much has been said, that has been harmful, I think they felt they had to do something, and unfortunately, it's had repercussions on deserving individuals.
Can you both share some experiences and accounts that you can give to our viewers, a more personal encounter with the migrant experience? Any stories or testimonies?
Sure.
Firsthand, I would think you
Firsthand,
would have.
yeah. So I came to the U.S. when I was 17, 18, and I've been here for some time now. So, I'm a lawyer, but I'm always like an immigrant first. And I started here as a volunteer. And when I came in and I shared with Sister Janet and all of the volunteers that I was onboarding with at that moment, is that, for me, I feel that this is my opportunity to give back. And personally speaking too, even though I came here from Peru, my dad also did. And my dad was the first one that came here, and he's now always teaching us to be kinder and also to go after that quote-unquote American dream. So from that personal perspective, I want to help other people chase that quote-unquote American dream. On another note, working here and dealing with the immigrants that are coming here and asking for help, it's really opened up my eyes of really the truths of the world. Weekly I hear, unfortunately, of women being sexually abused or people running from their country because of extortions of this or the other, So it's really taught me to be a lot more kind than what I think I already was, and to really be able to help people that are on a situation of need.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, the impact on the children of these families, again, immeasurable. Some of them, then have, learning challenges in school. We have a separate place in the clinic here where the children, we have things for them to play with while the parents are working on the application, because we feel we want to try to separate the kids from having to relive it again. But with some of the children, to even separate them from their parents because of the trauma, of losing their parent again, kind of thing, and what they went through, immeasurable, and the nightmares, and, the reliving that they have to go through. I say no one should have to go through, what they've lived through trauma once, then to go through the trauma, this again. We had a woman who I have to say, who's representing herself, who contacted us the other day after her hearing, and the judge was like, he was like merciless on her, and because there's some grammatical errors in her application, and then he says, well, all this documentation, it's in English. How do you know what this says? She says, so she was great. She says, because I had it in Spanish. She says, but I understand that everything must be translated into English in order for my application to be accepted. So she gave it right back to him. But this is what happens. This is how they're treated. And then in the next breath, he looks at another document and says, oh, well, your identification document, yeah, it's in Spanish. Yeah, I think I can read what that says. I mean, it's just
like a real test, right?
Yeah, like
endurance, right?
An endurance test,
Yeah, and yet we know that generational trauma is a real thing.
Yeah.
And the longer you prolong it, the more harm you do to the person.
Yeah. And on an up note, I have to tell you how excited they are, after their application has been filed at 150 days, they can come in and apply for a work permit. They can't up until that point,
Right.
and they're not eligible until 180 days. How thrilled and excited they are when they get that work permit, because now they can work legally here, and they can have an opportunity to do better for their families instead of being part of the underground economy. And at times, to be honest with you, they're being treated unfairly, and they have no option, right? They have no option because they're not documented, because they don't have a work, they don't have the same rights. So, as you or I would be, those protections. So, all they want is a safe, secure place to raise their family, to give back to their communities, to be incorporated as part of it. We feel blessed that we have a place that is like a safe, is a safe haven for them. When from the moment they walk in the door, they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel they've been brought into a community, and that's what they want. They don't want to be isolated. They don't want to be by themselves. They want to be here. They want to be a part of us, and I think we need to offer them every opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's the good work, the great work that you're doing here at the Long Island Immigration Clinic, and the work of Kino, as you had mentioned, Janet. Also, organizations like Annunciation House, Catholic Charities Rio Grande. These are the groups of people, the communities that are welcoming and open arms, open hands, open hearts, as people need to leave their country of origin, where they're encountering the true spirit of the United States. And so what a help that is to begin to relieve some of the trauma and to help them find their way, for a future that is prosperous.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a quote, Valerie Carr. She's an attorney and does some wonderful ones. She's a woman of the Sikh faith, and she says a quote. When I look in the eyes of another person, I say, "You are a part of me I do not yet know." And I think that is just such a wonderful expression. And those who are into we know the larger cosmological story. We know that we all share a piece of one other very organically. But I think if we could look the other in the eye and say, "You are a part of me that that I need to know and learn more about," I think we'd be pleasantly surprised about what we could learn, not only about ourselves, but about that other person in front of us.
Yeah.
You reminded me of Victor Hugo's Les Mis, and to love someone to see the face of God.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And
That's
think about how many people have sat in Broadway, expensive seats to see that play and be moved by that. Just to remind ourselves of maybe put on that soundtrack when you're praying about this, and think about the power of second chances, opportunities, giving families a real chance. And perfectly tie in here to our final note. Pope Francis has famously stated that it is a grave sin to drive away migrants. This is a statement that has become highly used within the church, but also in political circles as well, as we see both parties continue to wrestle with how to win over the Catholic voter. What advice and or inspiration could you offer to Catholics and Christians watching who are worried about this grave sin? And specifically when I say Catholic families, you're thinking about trauma and leaving the home. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to leave a home with a family. I have 2 little ones. It's incredibly hard to just go to Mass on time. I'm always late to Mass. Now imagine if we're packing, and I think about this when I pack things up. I'm like, imagine if this was it, like we're leaving right now. Like, I know that's a little dark to think about, but every now and then, as part of our prayerful exercise, Nina and I will sometimes think about it, like, just imagine if this was,
You have to
so,
go now.
yeah, here we go, that's it. We're never coming back here, or on whatever our journey is. So, with that folks in mind, what advice or inspiration is helpful to the Catholic voter as they're processing this?
What's that adage? Love your neighbor as yourself, right? Love of God and love of neighbor. And for the Sisters of St. Joseph, that of course is, our charism. I think people have to go back to the gospel, to Jesus's message, and say, this is who we are. Not all this other stuff that's going on right now, but really to take to heart the gospel message, right? And as you say, before me is the face of God, and to see Christ, in one another. And I think if you can do that, and it's not always easy because we all know that, immigrant or not, we know how hard that is sometimes when somebody gets under our skin. But I think just as we have to, think about that, about our neighbor next door, we need to do that about those who are coming here for very good reasons. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, your country of origin, it's the human dignity of the person before us.
And you're certainly very good at it. I started as a volunteer here. So before I even came on board as working like part of the clinic, I remember I used to come from a very busy day of work and come here and I'm like, okay, now I need to sit down and be a volunteer. And the second you enter physically this facility, you're so welcomed, and that's your work and also Sisters Eileen's work. And to me, it's really, truly an honor to be able to join the mission and to now make other people feel welcome and to use my knowledge to further help the mission. And Sisters of St. Joseph, specifically yourself and Sister Eileen, have really taught me to extend on that kindness and to love your neighbor.
It's because you carry that same gift within your heart as well.
Oh, thank you.
That's right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
Well,
That's right.
fun times.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's so interesting because we are a country of immigrants, first, second, third generation, and yet that one can be annoyed or bothered or angered with people trying to cross into the country. What is it within me, within us, that's triggering that? Because if we can also get to the roots of that, as you said, it's hard work, but if we can do that interior work, we can also give a different response.
Yeah, there is a fear dynamic there,
Yeah.
a fear of what we do not know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to, I think, really work on.
Yeah, and the fear is also, I think we started this conversation off about language, and it's really true in the sense of like, we're sitting here, what is this show called? Breakthrough. How many times do you say things a lot so it becomes second hand to a viewer, to, marketing techniques is the same way that different campaigns use different languages, right? And so the more and more that we as a society have used this type of language to discuss this topic, the more I even struggle to use the word issue these days, because someone from the LGBT community said this to me. They said the more and more that we call something LGBT issue, the more we're identifying that person as an issue. And I was like, wow, that's really,
So insightful.
Yeah, I was like, holy cow, like I never thought of it like that, and I didn't realize how offensive I could be. But even still, moving the needle on how we use our language with other folks is how we have to do it.
Because then we're boxing people in, we're categorizing them, we're keeping them on the margins instead of us going to the margins and having them all in the circle.
Right.
Everyone belongs, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Embracing all.
So, love of God and love of neighbor without distinction, and from whom we do not separate ourselves. It's a challenge, but no one does it alone. We do it together.
Well, yeah, thanks for being here for this conversation, and thank you for tuning in. You know, this is unique because typically a lot of our content and such, we try to keep the conversation so people can revisit it. This is really specific. Next week is the election. You know, and so we're here now, and regardless of where your heart ends up taking you in the ballot box, in the polls, please prayerfully take this in and think of the dear neighbor when you go to vote. I mean, a few months ago we did a thing of voter profiles, thinking of different folks.
That's right.
Have those friends and those faces on your heart and on your mind when you go to vote, because it is a justice act.
Right, and you need to stay current because times change, and they are changing quickly, you know, as we live into them. But really, stay current, stay educated, stay informed, and then that's what's going to make a good electorate. You know?
May it be so. May it
Amen.
be so.
Amen. All right.
Thank you, and
Thanks.
thanks for your continued great work.
Thank you. Privileged to be here. Thank you.